Our API is up and running and we're in Postman. On the left, you see a few faulty requests lined up. The first one is a GET request to get one specific author. We tried that one before, let's send it again, and there we go. We get back an author, but this doesn't really look okay. The URI does not follow our guidelines. It contains GET in the URI segments. That's a verb and not a noun, and verbs don't belong in URIs. The HTTP method, that's the verb. So let's improve on that. We're looking at the authors controller. And here's the get author action. Let's change the URL. So this becomes a GET request signified by the HTTP GET attribute to API/authors/the author ID. And let's try that again. Let's switch back to Postman. The request we've got lined up here should fail this time. And indeed it does. We get back a 404 not found. If we look a bit further down in the list, we find a request to get an author at the correct URI. Let's send that. And there we go. Works as expected. That's one issue solved. We've got two more wrong requests lined up here though. Let's have a look at the first one. Let's send it. And we get back a list of authors. So far so good. However, these authors seem to live at API/author. And apparently we're using a post method to get a bunch of authors. That doesn't completely look okay. Let's have a look at the other one here. This is a get action that gets all the courses for a specific author. Let's send it. And this seems to work as well. So far so good. But is all of this okay? Well, one of the issues we've got here is consistency. We learned that we can use singular or plural nouns, but we shouldn't mix and match. So, author on one hand and courses on the other hand, that's inconsistent. Moreover, we just ensured that a specific author can be found at API/authors/the ID. And we want to remain consistent across these different URIs as well. Personally, I prefer to use plural nouns, so API/authors, but as long as you're consistent, you should be okay. So let's switch to the courses controller, and we've got API/author here. Let's change that to authors. As you can see, the courses controller is annotated with a route attribute. That avoids having to write API/authors/author ID/courses for all the routes to actions in this controller. Whatever we set as template at controller level for the route attribute will be prefixed to the templates we set at action level. So, while we're at it, let's use this on our authors controller as well. So we apply a route attribute API/authors. And let me collapse this a bit. That means that the action to get a list of authors no longer requires us to input a route template for the HTTP post attribute, as we will already get that from the template passed through at controller level. Getting one specific author will now be possible at API/authors, followed by the author ID, and creating one specific author should be opposed to API/authors, but we no longer have to input that here because we've already inputted it at level of the controller. Let's give this a try. Let's try getting the courses for an author at a URI that is consistent. And that now seems to work. Getting a list of authors should now also be possible from API/authors instead of API/author. So let's give that a try. And that seems to fail. What's going on here? Well, we are still using post to get a list of authors. And the issue we run into now is that we've got an HTTP post to API/authors to create an author, and an HTTP post to API/authors to get a list of authors. That results in ASP.NET Core not being able to route to the correct action. We could now go for changing the URL of get authors, for example, but that's not what we want to do. The URI is correct, but the method used to get a list of authors isn't. It can work, but it's not according to the HTTP standard. This is the exact thing that would keep some caches from caching this result, and that is not what we want. Instead, we should follow the HTTP standard and use an HTTP GET instead of an HTTP POST to get a list of authors. Alright, let's give that another try. And this time, instead of getting the authors with POST, we try getting them by sending a GET request to API/authors. And there we go. This now works. So while what we started with was functional, it worked, it wasn't consistent and it didn't correctly follow the HTTP standard. The few simple changes we just made our API more readable and reliable. But we're not there yet. If we look back at some of the requests we previously sent, we notice that they all return a 200 OK status code. And if we have a look at the courses controller, we see that that indeed seems to be the case. Getting the courses for an author ends with a return OK statement. But creating a course for an author also seems to end with a return OK statement. And that is not OK. Let's learn what that's about and why that is not OK.